Imagine the scene 75 years ago as a band of believers came together to build a modest house of worship in the middle of Harford County, naming it after the grove of white oak trees surrounding the area. Their plans, their dreams, have become the history of what we now know as Oak Grove Baptist Church.
I'm not sure they had a vision of what Oak Grove could become, but I do think they dreamed a dream of what Oak Grove became. These folks that started Oak Grove would have never dreamed of a sanctuary that would seat the capacity you have now. It's not the numbers, it's not the building, not the dollars, not even the staff. And you've had some outstanding pastors across the years. I think the Spirit has made the church what it is.
Among the first charter members were many farmers who moved their families to Harford County from North Carolina and Virginia.
I remember the day that Dad left Foresthill with a team and wagon to go to Shook's Corner to help in digging the basement for the building we now call Building Number 2. The digging was done with teams of horses and dirt scoops. The ground was so hard that the men could not keep the scoop in the ground without using a turning plow and plowing first and then moving the dirt with the scoop.
We went to the Oddfellows Hall up on the hill, and they bought the piece of land and built a church there. It was a little thing. It wasn't very big, but it was nice. It was nice. We were so happy when it was there.
The early members' decision to finance and build a Southern Baptist church was made during the most severe economic depression ever experienced by the Western world. What was to be called the Great Depression lasted throughout the 1930s. Unemployment and homelessness soared. It was during these times that the earliest roots of Oak Grove were planted, during the summer and fall revivals held in 1931.
Oak Grove Baptist Church was born in the midst of a spiritual revival led by S.C. Blackburn and J.O. Spencer.
And of course the revival meetings drew lots of those farmers. More and more of those farmers began to come and bring their families. And those who were converted in the revival meetings were baptized in Bynum Run.
We did not have a baptismal pool at church, therefore we had our baptisms down at Bynum Run once a year in August after the revival.
In fact, I was baptized down here in Bynum Run. You know, it was a quiet little stream that flowed down. And people who lived around and who was traveling the roads at the time when these baptisms were going on, they wondered what it was coming off. And they'd stop the cars till, you know, you just, a lot of people thought there was an accident or something.
And when we had revivals, everyone could not get into the church. So they would park their cars by the side of the church and the windows would be open because the revivals are always held in the month of August. And they could hear the message that the pastor was giving. In 1941, Reverend Spencer needed a desk for his office in his church and his home. So the church bought one for him, and in exchange he gave us a bookcase. And people donated the books. And so that was the beginning of the church library.
The late 40s and 50s hold special memories for many Oak Grove members. It was a time of family, fellowship, outreach, and continued growth in the church. The parsonage was built next to the church at a cost of $13,000. The first youth week with Bob Vaught as youth pastor was held at Oak Grove, and Mrs. S.A. Richardson was elected the first church organist. As the community continued to grow, new members joined the church. The need for space to meet needs of the church family increased. Reverend Younger J. Dykes was called to Oak Grove to succeed J.O. Spencer, who resigned because of illness. One of the highlights during Reverend Dykes' ministry at Oak Grove was the addition of the original sanctuary.
We decided to build some more Sunday school space and some more worship space. And if you look at some of those pictures there in the historical room, you can see that some of them are packed out tight. After a few months, we saw things were still rolling along, and we decided to build. We built on the east side and went as far as we could go at the time, because we had to have room to drive between the church building to get around to the cemetery. Then we had an opportunity to buy the house that was there.
Following Reverend Dykes to the Oak Grove pulpit was Leo Hebert of Pineville, Louisiana. He served as pastor from 1955 through 1957. It was during this period that Oak Grove celebrated its 25th anniversary and formed a Constitution Committee to write a constitution and bylaws. Dr. Vander Warner was called in 1958 to be Oak Grove's fifth pastor.
And the pulpit committee from Oak Grove came to hear a neighboring pastor. He said, "I'm not interested, but I got a young man I'd like to suggest to you." He gave them my name. And Ralph Walls and the committee came down, listened to me, invited me up. And I was a bit interested at first, but not a lot, and felt that, no, I don't think I want to do that. And months passed, I don't know, 2 or 3. And one night the Lord just brought it to my heart. Maybe you should really consider this church. I called Ralph Walls, and I said, "Ralph, have you got your pastor?" He said, "No, we haven't. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I came up and preached, and felt the Lord calling us here. My wife never came up. First time she had saw the church, all the place we were going to live, which was hard by the church, was when we drove up on that day. I came the first Sunday in July 1958.
Oak Grove has been a leader in starting new ministries. It was under Dr. Warner that the deaf ministry at Oak Grove began and continues today.
When I came to Oak Grove, the church had experienced significant pain. They had had what Baptists hate, something of a split. At least a number of people left. A lot of leadership had gone. And so there was room for growth, as a matter of fact. We did experience wonderful growth, and before we built that new sanctuary, on nearly all special events, I'm not talking about Easter or Christmas, but other special events, people would sit in the aisles in that lovely old building, and it was T-shaped or cross-shaped, as you know. It was hard to preach in because you had to look this way, and if you looked there, you weren't looking at 2/3 of your congregation. But we made it work somehow or another. But I felt that the church deserved a more beautiful place of worship, and I felt we could do it. I talked with 2 or 3 of the men. They agreed with me. And then I just did it incrementally. I talked to 2 or 3 of the guys and gals. They said, "Let's try it." I talked to the deacons. They okayed it. We appointed a building committee, a survey committee, to see what our needs really were. And so, little by little, we did it.
Mr. Harlan came into my office one day and said, "Does the church want that lot on the corner of Thomas Run Road?" Well, we had been told that he had been offered over $20,000 for it, for a filling station. And I said, "Paul, we'd like to have it, but we can't pay what you've been offered." He said, "I didn't ask you that. I asked you if the church would like to buy it." And I said, "We'd like to have it." And he said, "Well, make me an offer." So we talked it over, and we made him an offer of $5,000, which was what we thought we could scrape together, and that was tough enough. We wanted to build a building to worship in. We secured the services of J. Alfred Hom. We determined to build a building that was not just a big red brick building. Hom came up with this plan and this design, and we liked it, and that's what we went with.
On September 20th, 1964, the congregation entered the new sanctuary for worship. Pastor Warner and the surviving charter members led the worshipers from the original sanctuary to the new one, singing, "To God be the glory."
I have always said, and I say it with some emotion, Oak Grove is a very special church. I'm not sure the people really understand that. I've been around the country, and I've gone a lot of places since I left here in 1965 and seen lots of churches. This is an exceedingly rare church.
Reverend Richard Coffrin served as associate pastor with Dr. Warner from 1964 to 1965. David Wilson followed Reverend Warner to preach at Oak Grove in 1966. During the term of Reverend Wilson, Oak Grove celebrated the 35th anniversary of the church. Dr. R.G. Pucket, then editor of the Maryland Baptist newspaper, joined other staff members from the Baptist State Convention to serve as the interim pastor of Oak Grove after Pastor Wilson resigned.
David Wilson resigned as pastor of Oak Grove, and they invited me to come and preach on a somewhat regular basis. And it was at that point, I suppose, that my relationship with the church was really guaranteed. I was very fond of the church, had immense appreciation for the church and the people, and they were very kind to me to invite me to do various things. So that's how it began.
Throughout his interim service, Dr. Pucket continued with the evangelical roots begun under O.J. Spencer.
Our concept of fellowship is not just coffee and dessert with friends. We're not knife and fork Baptists, but we're partners with people in whatever they may be doing. And I think as long as the church focuses on those three things, proclamation of the gospel to reach people for Christ, and the ministering of people, in other words, preaching the gospel without words, and also the fellowship. We need to be the presence of Christ in our world, as turbulent and as painful as it may be.
I was privileged to pastor Oak Grove from March 21st, 1971 to May 7th, 1989, a little over 18 years. In 1971, a layman in Oak Grove, Don Blanton, on vacation in Texas at the First Baptist Church of Pasadena, asked the pastor after the morning service if he would recommend anyone to become pastor of Oak Grove. Don told the pastor there a little bit about the church. And the pastor, Dr. Morgan, recommended me. Well, eventually, members of the pulpit committee came down to my church, and they recommended me to be pastor at Oak Grove. My wife sort of coached me to say that Oak Grove is really God's will for our lives. So I decided to stay, and in a few months I'd fallen in love with Oak Grove and spent some of the best years of my life there. I've been asked what were my early dreams for Oak Grove. Really two. One, I had the feeling it could become one of Maryland's greatest churches, or even America's greatest churches, if I could get the people to believe in themselves. They had so much lay talent, like Edith Boggs at the piano, and so much giftedness and talent throughout the lay congregation. And they were located in a perfect place right in the middle of Harford County, Maryland. And I could see that they could become one of America's leading churches. In fact, we even advertised it this way in newspapers. Join the surging crowd. Come to one of America's greatest churches, the Oak Grove Baptist Church. Another dream I had for Oak Grove is that it could become a quality place of worship all 60 minutes, not just the sermon, but prior to the sermon. And I wanted to treat every service like it was Christmas or Easter. On my part, I probably didn't work any harder on the Christmas sermon or an Easter sermon, maybe 30 extra minutes than I did on any sermon, because I believed in the quality of a worship service every single Sunday.
And in February of 1976, we started the January Bible study, though that was obviously February, but it was later the name changed to the Winter Bible Study. And for 15 consecutive years, from 76 through 1990, I did the Winter Bible Study at Oak Grove.
And after the Bible conference, each night we had what we called Pucket's Pie Party. At least we had it the first night. And people in the church would bring their favorite pie, and we would eat and sort of roast Gene Pucket. There was a lot of humor that exchanged between Gene Pucket and Louis McDonald. We had a lot of fun together.
I spent a lot of time planning for not only the Sunday school lessons, but also for some activities, social activities and retreats for us. Then there were the all-church parties, which I think we all enjoyed so very much. We had a lot of musical presentations, and we had a lot of musical talent at Oak Grove. And we did a lot of comedy routines as well.
Let me tell you a little bit about my staff. I've been asked about them. Aubrey Stewart came on first as minister of church program. Aubrey was an expert in Sunday school, had the pastor's training and a pastor's heart, and didn't care who got the glory. And he was really a great help. My greatest need outside of a secretary, and I had one only half day. We had Fred in the vault, that was it. Had a custodian, Bert Coombs, who did the grounds too, and that was it. One of America's greatest churches. We don't even have a full-time secretary. But the staff member that would lift my load the most would be a secretary. After that would be the minister of church program. If we didn't have a minister of music, I wouldn't lead the music. But if we didn't have a minister of church program, I'd almost have to be the leader of that. So Aubrey was a great load lifter as well as a great friend. He came aboard July 1971. Dee Solomon came aboard just a few months later in September 1971 as our minister of music. Dee could make an empty pew sing. He was a master musician. He really was. He's one of the greatest I ever saw. He could make a choir sing and a congregation sing.
Dee Solomon has been noted for his music talent and creativity throughout his time at Oak Grove. For America's bicentennial, the Oak Grove Choir, under Dee's direction, presented the musical I Love America. The choir was dressed in homemade period costumes, and special sets were designed and erected in the sanctuary.
Oak Grove may have had July 4th parade features prior to my coming, but they didn't have them as much as we were committed to it. And we were winning first place among church floats year after year. And in 1976, the most strategic of all the July 4th parades, because it was the bicentennial, we not only won the church first place, we won everything first place. We beat out businesses and you name anyone else involved, and we just won the grand title.
Dee also organized the first living Lord's Supper as the Easter presentation. Men from the church would dress as the disciples and reenact the Last Supper during the evening worship service.
Then we had Harold Hubble. Harold loved to visit people. He's a people person. He did a lot and still does a lot of pastoral care. And he really didn't care who got the credit as long as the job got done.
Harold Hubble was elected Minister of Lay Evangelism and Church Administration in March 1974.
I also brought Ken Tipton on staff. I'd worked a revival or two with Ken, in which I was the preacher and he was the minister of music. And he was excellent, not just at spiritual leadership, but in entertaining youth or adults, and we sort of blended together. And so Ken Tipton came to Oak Grove. Ken is remembered with a living Christmas tree.
Welcome to the 10th year of Oak Grove's fabulous living Christmas tree. 10 years is a long time. When we started this project, we had no idea when it may end, and at this point, we're not even thinking ending, because we're still excited about this great message that we proclaim to this community every year. We've made videos before, most of them about the program and the music and the drama, but this year we're going to take you behind the scenes for a look at some of the key players, some of the activities that make this Christmas tree work.
This tree is, has a lot of unusual specifications. The height of the tree is 47 foot to the top of the star. The width of the tree is 36 feet wide. Has 10 rows of platforms. Will hold 125 people max. It was designed to hold, each one of those people could be 250 pounds as far as the design specifications. Fortunately, we don't have that kind of a weight in our tree. We start at 7 o'clock in the morning and we unload the steel into the sanctuary. We had some snapshots taken of the tree when we first put it up, and it took us about 3 days to actually get the tree up. You can see the light change through those snapshots. And where we are today at noontime, we were starting on the second day to put the ladders on. To put the electric in, we spent about 3 days just putting electric in the tree. Compared to now, it goes in a matter of a couple hours. And so what took us pretty near a week to get the tree up. We now do pretty much in about 14 or 15 hours.
Sound people, are they important? I'll say they are. They have no room for error. They have to be very thorough. They have to measure everything just to the very 10th of a second so that they can bring the soloist in on time.
In order for us to present a seamless production, it's necessary that we have our timing proper up here. That is, when the choir sings and then there's a solo that follows it, or a spoken part, or possibly even a sound effect. It's necessary for us then to practice with the choir and then to have a proper program worked out before the choir actually sings.
Every one of these people work together. Now, this is just not a job. For us, it's a ministry. We do this so that we can carry the true message of Christmas, that Jesus Christ came into this world as a baby child to live, that through Him we too could live.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Ken will always be remembered with the living Christmas tree, and this is appropriate. And that tree has touched thousands of people across 20+ years, and he should be remembered with the living Christmas tree, and I was very happy and proud of him.
A Stirring of the Oaks was the theme adopted for the month-long 50th anniversary celebration. Jane Armstrong served as chairperson for the celebration. Dee Solomon wrote and directed a 2-night dinner theater that highlighted the history of the church, and there were former pastors and charter members as guests and speakers.
Another thing I began under my ministry that is such a simple thing, but I like to mention it, is that we would join hands at the end of a worship service and sing some hymn. We used to sing mostly in the early years about the Spirit. There's a sweet, sweet Spirit in this place. Also got started a radio ministry. In fact, we had 2 radio stations at one time. We were on the Bel Air radio station and on the Aberdeen radio station. And a lot of people really heard the gospel preached and sung across the years through this radio ministry. I took a poll one time and found out we had at least as many people listening on the radio as we did in the congregation for worship every Sunday. Another event that began during my ministry was the pace setters and the teenagers, senior adults. I think you call them mature adults now. But Harold Hubble began these, and there's another example of why the pastor needed a staff member.
Well, at that time, my mom was living. We give her credit for the birth of this teenager ministry. We had golden agers at that time, and I was talking to Lee Wilgus, who was a member at the Calvary Baptist Church, and we both kind of came up with the same idea, and I said, well, why don't we start something as 2 sister churches? Then I realized about 5 to 6 years after the teenagers began in 1974 that we were missing a great group of people who were with us but were not in that age bracket.
The singles ministry also began during my ministry, the Sunday school singles at Oak Grove.
When asked to reflect on his experience at Oak Grove, 2 events stand out.
When my son Stephen, David, and John Mark accepted Jesus as Savior of their lives, and when I baptized them. And this was the most meaningful event in my 18+ years. One other special moment, the 50th anniversary at Oak Grove. I guess what that did for me more than anything else, that as all these celebrations was taking place, especially the last service on a Sunday afternoon, was that I realized the little church among the Oak Groves had actually become one of America's greatest churches.
The year that saw Lewis's resignation because of poor health was also when Bob Brown, a layman in Oak Grove, was commissioned to go to Rwanda as a volunteer missionary with the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware. The following year, Charles Nichols and Aubrey Stewart made the same trip. The team constructed 2 pavilion worship centers and repaired a cottage. They also engaged in personal evangelism. They would build in the mornings and witness in the afternoon. This was just one of many missions that Oak Grove has been a part of throughout its 75-year history.
We have also sent out groups to different places. I think of Pittsburgh, on mission trip, Mississippi, Quebec, New York, Alabama. We developed a partnership with First Baptist of Long Beach, and that was quite an experience to go down there and see the destruction of the hurricane. Everything from the beach for 5 blocks up to the railroad tracks, which was raised a little higher, was just wiped out flat. We had worked on a couple different houses, kind of rebuilding one house. We continued to develop other projects.
David Hall became the 8th pastor of Oak Grove in December 1989 and has continued to expand the missions and outreach to the community spiritually and physically. Oak Grove has continued to improve and present the gospel to children in the community and church through training and education classes and the annual Vacation Bible Study that has its origins in the early church history. During Dr. Hall's ministry, the Living Christmas Tree continued to reach the community for Christ.
The Living Christmas Tree is really a ministry, and our people rally around that. They have seen so many lives changed and touched and challenged by the Living Christmas Tree that all of the effort is worth it.
I'm a visiting nurse, and I have an opportunity to work with dying patients every day. And in the 9 years of doing the tree, my tickets have been used oftentimes to bring families and my patients to see this tree, and sometimes it's been a real life-changing event for these people. These families have come to know Christ through the tree, and they never would have known it had it not been for this ministry.
Oak Grove has had a very active Royal Ambassador program for young boys and young men growing up in the church. From the start of the program over 50 years ago with Lewis Reds Wilmoth, through today, the leaders of the RAs were once members. Now they carry on the tradition with growth, stewardship, and a commitment to serving others. The 1990s saw continued growth and building at Oak Grove.
Well, fortunately, I don't believe we've ever gone into a building program that the people did not want. And as such, we had pretty good commitment for the buildings, and the church grew during the building programs. I don't think we've ever been in a building program that the church did not grow. Designed the building that is known now as building number 3 to tie in with the original building as far as floors, so there wouldn't be a lot of steps going from one to the other.
In January 1992, a plans committee was appointed to develop an education building that resulted, 4 years later, in what is now called Education Building Number 1. The building is 3 stories and includes 19 classrooms, 2 choir rooms, and a media center dedicated to Clara Richardson, who worked with the church's library for 45 years. The 90s and beginning of the 21st century has seen a number of changes in personnel at Oak Grove. Oak Grove's story through the last 75 years has been a story of great people with great faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. The people of Oak Grove have dared to dream impossible dreams. They've launched out numerous times with an incredible faith. It is now up to the staff and congregation to follow the Lord's lead.
As I see our church today, it is a church built on a wonderful past. It is a church on mission, not just in this community, but around the world. Could our founding fathers have ever imagined what the little church under the oaks would have become 75 years ago? Can we imagine what Oak Grove will become 75 years from now?